and we start. तैयार हो रहा है. Great. So hi everyone. We are live on Facebook, and today we are having a session, this interactive informal session with Arshia Eghbali. He's a cultural practitioner from Copenhagen.
So hi everyone, my name is Arshia and I'm very happy to be speaking to you today. And I want to say a big thank you to everyone, Shailesh, Anhad, Ankita, Madhur, and Deepak, who've made this possible and who are moderating this thing to make sure everything is going well and smooth. Talk to you soon.
Thank you, Arshia. I'll also introduce our moderators for today. We have Ankita from MIT's Gwalior, and we have Madhur Goyal from MIT's Gwalior, plus he has studied masters from CEP University. He has studied architectural research and criticism. And then we have Deepak, who is helping us with the live scribe and making notes for the live session today. And also he has given us this platform to share this session with all of you. And Anhad Bhai, who has connected us with Arshia, and Arshia has studied together in an EMMC scholarship. Hi, welcome Anhad, welcome Ankita, welcome Arshia, welcome Madhur, welcome Deepak.
Okay. First of all, we are very, very happy and very delighted that our extremely talented young cultural practitioner and architect, Mr. Arshia Eghbali, is here to join us. I am very grateful to the SOA for everything that they do in disseminating information and knowledge of their interest. I will just take 2 minutes to introduce Arshia to all of you and to also briefly talk about our background in urban studies and the context of that program to the talk today. So Arshia is an architect from Iran. I was very privileged to spend 2 years with him on as Shailesh rightly pointed out, on an EMMC scholarship across 4 cities in Europe and 6 universities. We were part of a program called 4 Cities, which was essentially an interdisciplinary master's in urban studies, which was, I'd say, an experience that comes once in a lifetime, for it was a program with a cohort of 31 people from 27 different countries in the world. Arshia and I were 2 amongst those 31. And I think the idea, more than anything, of the program, in addition to it being a master's program in urban studies, was to create some kind of a network of individuals engaging with urbanism in one way or the other. So we had a lot of people from architecture background, such as Arshia himself. I come from a social science background. And there were also people from rural studies or geography or literature. So it was a very interesting mix of people from different disciplines. He had to write a thesis, and I think it was in this context that Shailesh and I had come up with this idea, because one of the I mean, I think one of the objectives of the SOA is to try to stimulate architecture students and presumably students of other fields to look at their disciplines differently. How do you engage with your subject in ways other than what you have been exposed to in your classroom? So it was in that context and in that conversation the idea of introducing Arshia to all of you and to all the viewers who are watching this live right now came. For he wrote an extremely fascinating, extremely personal, and extremely interesting thesis, which of course will be talked about in the course of this session. I am hopeful that this will be a larger concerted effort towards what we have also set out to achieve, which is to create a network of people engaging with their disciplines, be that architecture or any other, in unorthodox ways, in unconventional ways. I would like to request and urge all the previous 4 citizens and members of the 4 cities forum to the floor to our moderators for today. Thank you, and thank you, Shailesh, for having me on this session.
Thank you, Anhad bhai. Now we'll invite Arshia and Ankita to take the platform.
So, hi again, everyone, and thank you very much. Ankita.
Hello, everyone. Hi, Arshia. I would like to ask about the different perspectives you take to look into architecture. Like, how do you approach to things in architecture?
Yeah. So to answer that question, I think it's better if I go through some slides that I have prepared, and let's take it from there. So I'm going to share my screen now, and here we go. Okay. So let's have a very simple question at first, and that is that, okay, where am I now? And try to give like a few different answers to this. So, well, of course, first of all, I'm on your screens. You can see me, or you could at least now, I don't know. Maybe you're just seeing this slide, but this is where I am. But also, I'm here up there somewhere in northern Europe, in this small dot over there, which is Denmark. And then we can zoom in a little bit, and this is a map of Copenhagen. And I'm up there again, as you can see, near those nice lakes. We can even get a bit more closer than that. And this is actually this room that I am in. It's right all behind me and around me. And as you can see, I'm just sitting there right on that little chair in front of that window and by the desk. And even closer than that, this is right what's in front of me, exactly here. I'm facing this window and this desk and laptops and everything. And you guys are also all there. I see you on the screen. So this probably is the favorite activity, or the favorite game of one of my favorite writers, the French writer Georges Perec, who has a book called Species of Spaces. And in that book, he actually goes from the space of the page that he's writing on to the space of his bed, to the space of his bedroom, to his apartment and the city, whatnot. So just like I did now. And I think that's a very crucial and essential way to look at space and to understand it as a multi-scalar entity. To see that space is maybe just like an onion with its many layers, and at any given moment in time, we are at once in a multitude of spaces and places and scales, as we just saw. So right now I'm at this desk, but I'm also in this room. I'm in Copenhagen. I'm in Denmark. There are just so many spaces that at once I am in any of them. And it's important to also see that whenever we are speaking at any of these scales, we are also redefining our relationships to space within that scale. And it's important to see all of these things at once. So in the course of this presentation, I'm going to use the word home quite often. And that is because I'd like to go about the question, how do we anchor ourselves in the world? And in that sense, then home, this home that I'm talking about, is in a much larger and more multifaceted sense than the one that we would normally just use to indicate the space that we live in. So home in this larger sense and in this multi-scalar sense that we just saw is our reference point in our everyday life. And it's the way that we actually ground ourselves or anchor ourselves in the world, because no one can be at home in infinity. And so we need all these different levels of engagement with different levels of scales of space to feel able to navigate ourselves in the world. So home is our closest backdrop of familiarity. And in that sense, every truly inhabited space carries the essence of the notion of home. And this all might sound a little bit too abstract, but again, if we just take it back to the level of our everyday lives, we can just see that the functions and practices of which the home is at once the effective setting and the reason for their existence give a detailed portrait of our lives. And then to take Walter Benjamin, the German philosopher's words, to live is to leave traces. And then I'd take it from there and say, then to, it is through going through those traces that we can actually arrive at a reading of home. And this is something that I've been trying to do in the past couple of years, to read homes. And I'm again talking about home in a larger sense. And that I have done in, let's say, two main projects. One is my master's thesis, and the other one is another more artistic project. So the master thesis is titled From the Bed to the City, Microgeographies of Home-making on the Run. And the context is that, okay, so in today's world, we are witnessing a rapid rise in mobility. People are moving all the time. And to see what does that mean for being anchored in the world, and how does it change the notion of home. So what I did was that I actually started studying my friends and classmates who were doing this master's, for which, as Anne had told you, we had to travel a lot. And then we had to live in different cities for short periods of time. What I did was I conducted some sort of ethnography on these people, and then tried to grasp this multiscalarity of homely spaces. And to do that, I imagined the space of a room of an individual to be the beginning point. So from there, if you look at every person's room, you can see so many material objects, so many practices that are related, and they are entrenched between the four walls of that room. But when you look more closely, you will see that each of these things is related to yet another scale of space. There you might just have something that you brought from your home country. You might have something that you just bought from the shop next door, or you just got it on a Facebook group. So you just see that this life that is entrenched between these four walls soon transpasses that. And then you can see all of these different multiscalar homely world interconnected in this small space. Another project was something that I called To All the Beds I Loved. And this is basically just me following all the places that I have slept in during the past 5 years. And so I just made myself a method to remember all these spaces and to reproduce them. And how I did that was that I first made a list of all those places that I could remember. It was a long list of so many places. And then I tried to remember all of those places just from my memory, and then to try to draw a little plan of those spaces on a piece of paper, and maybe just like write a few things about how I remembered that space. And then from then on, I embarked on a journey of self-archaeology, as I would like to call it. And that is to go and look back at all the pictures that I had from my own life. You name it, like in different messages that you've been sending on different platforms, Instagram posts, Facebook posts, whatnot, everything that might give you some evidence of how your life looked in a certain stage, and how the places that you've been to have been depicted in those pictures. So then that kind of evidence helps me polish the image that I had from all of these places that I remembered from memory. And then I try to reconstruct them architecturally, and then as coldly as possible. So the result was a drawing such as these that you can see on the screen. And then again, the point there is that how we can see that our memories and our life is again coming back to these anchor points. And in this case, it's not even a home, but it's just like a place that you spend maybe just one night at. And that, in a way, just helps you navigate through your memory. So all of this is to say that I'm talking today more about the lived experience of space. And I think this is just going back to Ankita's question, is all in my view the flip side of architecture. So we as architects draw lines to contain people's lives, and soon those lives just transpass those lines, and we will see life happening. So yeah, that's all from me. Ankita, we're not hearing you. I think you're muted.
Right now, am I audible?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was amazing, like the way you presented things. It was totally great. And the architectural dialogue you've created between materialistic objects and everyday lives was great to see. But I would like to initiate a question here. Can you, while doing the project, how you related the urban designing or landscape designing or other things to your house elements? If you'd like to comment on it.
Yeah. So yes, again, I think it's just to understand how these different scales interact with each other, and that can be that can be an interesting journey, because you might just look at a room and then see that there is no desk in that room. And then by knowing that the occupant of that room is, say, a student, then you'll understand that that person needs to go somewhere to study. And this already just opens a portal to their everyday life in a way that you will then see that, yeah, like maybe there is a library that they frequent every day, maybe there is their university that they have to go to every day just to study, because they cannot do it at home without a desk or without whatnot. And that's just like the way that like different places can be connected to each other through very simple trivial objects and practices that we might just take them for granted. And again, we need then something to take us from this domestic space to that other public space that we want to go through. Are we using public transport? Are we taking a bike? Are we using a car to go there? And all of these things, again, form our everyday experience of the city that we live in, just in relation to all these different levels of and scales of space.
So, if I would like to ask questions about undergraduate thesis, is like people when people attain undergraduate thesis, they are very confused because all the guidelines there are, they have to set up their own guidelines, they have to work on their own interests, their capabilities, and like you have to set your limitations by yourself, because there is from first year to third year we are always given a project in which we are working, and we are given guidelines. But now when we are perceiving thesis, we have to make them by ourselves. So what would you like to comment on that, like how a student can approach this thing?
Yeah, yeah, that's definitely an important challenge, I think, in doing a thesis, just as you said, and I think it's it's a very important element in doing a thesis, to be able to give yourself certain boundaries and certain limits that that will help you ground your work into something. Because otherwise, if you know, like it's great to go on and try your hand on many different ideas and many different ways of thinking, but then at a certain point you have to give yourself limitations and try to use that limitation as an opportunity to get creative. Because otherwise there is, as I just said with homes, there is you know, you can never feel at home in infinity. And it's the same thing with doing even a thesis. You can never do it or like be creative within infinity. You need to set some boundaries for yourself to be able to then be also creative.
Yeah, that was great insight. I would like to pass my mic to Madhur. Madhur, can you share?
What?
Yeah.
Hi.
I think your mic is.
Yeah. Hi, I'm audible. Hello.
Hi, Madhur, we hear you.
Yeah, I'm audible. Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead, Madhur.
Okay. Yeah. Hi, Arshia.
Hi.
So I really looked your thesis day before about the presentation today, and I really see a lot of insights about your ethnographic studies, about your memory. So this reminds me of the times, you know, when you have a lot of childhood memories and you recollect them and you take it forward. So this is like this thesis is more like a collection of memories through the spaces. Here I just recalled a book from Gaston Bachelor, The Poetics of Space. So he talks about like, his childhood memories, the attic spaces, the way he used to take those spaces into his memories, and what directs him to his design process. So here I will be talking about two areas. One, about your research methodology, that what kind of research methodology you went through for your thesis, and second, how you guide students there to look forward. It is just, it's a search, it's a quest to find their subject of areas of research. So how you elaborate on that?
Yeah, thank you, Madhur. That's a very interesting reference that you make to Bashnar and these like the idea that he talks about home as something that houses our memories, and then again going to the methodology of the thesis. So I was really influenced by the work and inspired by the works of Georges Perec, as I just showed in my slides. So I tried to build up some sort of a methodology inspired by his works, which are actually works of literature and not research per se, but I can say that it actually informs my methodology in, say, three main axes. And one of them is this notion of multiscalarity of space that I talked about. So that's one axis. Another one is the interconnectedness of life narratives and material objects. And the third one is a certain kind of autobiographicality that transcends the personal. So to explain each of these and how they actually play into this methodology, I'd say the first one, I think I went through it already with the presentation, what I mean with all this multiscalarity. So that's that. With the second one, which is interconnectedness of life narratives and material objects. Perec actually has a book, like his most famous book, which is titled Life, a User's Manual in English, is a very thick book of, say, 800 pages or something. And the interesting thing about that book is that contrary to the conventional structure of a novel that unravels through time, this one is purely spatial. So everything is just happening in 1 second, but in different spaces. And he has imagined this apartment building where the facade is lifted and you can see all the pieces at once. And each chapter is one of these pieces that you can see. And what he does is that basically he's just giving a thorough description of all the spaces and whatever is happening in that given moment of time. And you might think, okay, this is going to be a very boring book. But what happens is that, again, as I said with the example of those rooms that I showed, those lives and objects and everything that is entrenched between those four walls soon surpasses those walls and just connects to every to so many other spaces and scales. So that's what Perec does while describing different material objects in these places. He starts talking about where they have been acquired by this character in this scene and how, like, where they're coming from, and then like so many anecdotes and narratives are attached to these objects. So that becomes the core of my methodology as well, so that I went to my participants' homes, and then I documented their homes quite meticulously in so many details. So I started photographing those spaces. I made architectural surveys and whatnot. And then after that, we had long interview sessions when we talked about all of these things, and then that enables me to attach all those life narratives to these objects, and these objects become the portals to go between all these different scales of homemaking. And then the third axis that I mentioned is this certain kind of autobiographicality that is an important part of Pavlik's work. That's what I've been also trying to do in my work. And that is to always have a look on one's own life, but at a level that is also not purely personal, but can also extend to a collective experience. So that was the idea behind going and studying my friends and my classmates. And again, that's the idea behind my other project of looking back at my own places where I have slept. So I think that's more or less about methodology.
Okay. So like I would summarize your methodology here, like there are mappings, let's say mapping a world, like so there are like cultural mapping, the patterns of life, the living patterns, the tangible and intangible mapping. So tangible would be like the materialistic objects. Those could be like the daily used props for your living and the materials associated with that. And intangible means maybe the memories which you are taking forward, like you have drawn multiple homes drawings, so that suggests that okay, you have been living into different homes in different cities, and those are your memories that are also taking you forward to a certain point of life. So there you are concluding, okay, that is your atmosphere, you are creating your atmosphere with the materials and the spaces and all those things collectively. Okay, so here, I think my both the questions are being somewhere answered, like your research methodology and how students can actually do a lot of collecting data in terms of tangibles, intangibles, how their observations. So it is more about increasing the visual peripherals around a person, so they can accumulate, understand. And I think what Ankita was asking the question about, okay, what is the different perspective to look into architecture for thesis? So these are the better ways. Like for example, if a student wants to is interested into get into the materialistic applications of a particular for particular subjects, like let's say he can go to some rural village or some area. He can just get into the study of okay, what is the life pattern there, what are the materials which are being used, and the same material in the city, how the life pattern changes with the same material. So let's say if there is wood or earth, how that is being replicated into cities, then in the rural areas. So this is how there are a lot of I think mapping is one of the process where students can actually realize, okay, what are the differences and how they can go forward with it. All right. Also, I have another question. Maybe what came to my mind. What your take is on like when you are saying that you started your presentation that okay, I am here, home. So you suggested your pin location on a map of a city. So how you see your like I went through your thesis, you say that you have been sleeping at different places, from in your bed to different places in the city. So do you see the urban fragments or the urban crops as the interiors of your room? Like how you see that? Like for example, if you have been living in a particular city, let's say Copenhagen, for a certain time of your period, like of your working, let's say. So how that plus your earlier city where you have lived, like how you take the things or collect the things from those urban crops to your living spaces. So I would like to know about it.
Yeah, that's very interesting question because I think again that that happens on various levels, and as you made this interesting distinction between the tangible ones and the non-tangible ones, we can actually I think look at it in that way in a sense here as well, because when you when you're living in a space, you definitely have material connections to that space in a way. Once you compare your different places of living, you understand that there are certain things, even within the materiality of the room, that is typical of a certain city. You see like certain kinds of material, like built materials that are used in a certain kind of city. You have different or specific kinds of windows, of all sorts of things. And then again, when you are moving between these places, you also acquire objects and things that you can take around with yourself. So this is maybe just on the level of these materialities, which are fixed materialities of the room itself. As I said, like the window, the floor finish, the walls and everything that could actually tell you a lot about this specific place or city that you are in. Because, you know, like windows in Copenhagen normally have a certain kind of shape and they all open to the outside. Whereas in let's say in Tehran, we open windows to the inside. And so you just see like these things already can give you some context on that. And then again, there are the like the non-tangible elements and aspects of it that are also quite interesting. So the kind of noise that you get through your windows, the kind of light that you get, and all of these again, this is just maybe the more climatic aspect of it. But then at the same time, the rhythm of life that you build in a city is very specific to that city. The times of the rush hours of that city, um, the coming up of sun, the going down of light, and all of that changes when you are in a different city. Then again, you also have like a different approach to life in different cities because of their urban infrastructure or the urban rhythm in that city. If you're living in a city in a metropolis of 20 million people, uh, a gigantic city that you have to take the car to move around, that's one way of living. Then you can be in Copenhagen where you can actually use your bicycle to go everywhere, and that's how people are living. So you get and you adapt to that sort of life, and then it changes the rhythm of your grocery shopping. It changes the rhythm of your daily life, and in that sense, it also affects again your immediate surroundings in both a tangible and a non-tangible.
Yeah, eventually, yeah, that builds your space, your atmosphere, like your surroundings. So, I'm not sure, but yeah, your thought processes, like everyone's observations, are going to be really changed after the COVID situation. So, post COVID-19 is going to be one of the, I think, one of the. It will invoke a lot of areas of thought processes, that how the spaces will redefine themselves, because everything in the system, in the ecosystem, will change. It won't be like completely accepted as before it was. So it will be another, the direction of looking at the spaces, and might be re-looking your future, which might be okay. So it can be a good comparative analysis that, okay, what was your atmosphere earlier, maybe what will be the future. So great, great, Arshia. It was a nice conversation, and I will hand over to the Shailesh about the next process. Thank you, Arshia.
Thank you, Madhur.
Yeah, so
Shailesh, are you?
Yeah, Anand bhai, do you want to like conclude or maybe speak some points that has interested you or something like that?
Sure. Why not? Well, I mean, first of all, it was very nice to hear your questions, and also to hear Arshia speak about a subject that he's so passionate about. Of course, for me, I've had this was a second viewing. I had the privilege of having read and seen his presentation before. I think the only thing I would comment on in this context is the need, I think, to look at everything differently, especially in the aftermath of COVID-19. I'm hopeful that whatever Arshia has been able to share with you today, especially those who are still enrolled in architecture schools, will look at firstly things that are presumably not talked about in your classrooms. Secondly, to also reflect on structures and spaces, not just as structures and spaces, but as the sum total of your experiences. I think one of the I think it was in our first semester, and it was in Brussels, and Arshia, I think it was Arshia and me, and there was somebody else, and I don't think it was Arshia, but the third person who said that when we come back to Brussels to defend, do you think our thesis? Do you think Brussels will be the same city that we are living in right now? And that got me thinking that sure, we look at spaces and structures, but spaces and structures and places are the people that you share them with and what you make them out to be. So I think and I hope that this session will be viewed as a larger concerted effort towards approaching spaces and structures that way. That's all I have to say. There's also Deepak, I think. Shailesh, would you please?
Yeah, I'll invite Deepak to share his notes and live sketching that he has been doing till now. Deepak, can you share your screen? Yeah, thank you. Oh, wow. Great. दीपक, क्या आप इसको थोड़ा एक्सप्लेन कर सकते हैं टू द ऑडियंस? अभी तक आपको ये ड्राइंग क्या एक्सप्लेन करती है?
Shailesh?
हाँ भाई.
Yeah. Okay. So I can't. Is Deepak's microphone on? I can't hear him.
Yeah, it's on. He's going to.
Great. Great. We can't hear you, Shailesh.
Yeah, Deepak is unable to speak because his microphone is not working. Maybe he'll just show us a drawing for a brief time of period.
Right. In the meantime, Shailesh, any comments, inputs from you about the presentation, about the theme of the discussion?
Yeah, I mean, about the theme, I was really excited to hear about this when we first discussed that, he did thesis and he explained his experiences or his love towards the bed that he has lived in. That was quite interesting for an architect to listen about. You are connecting your cityscape with the beds that you have lived in different places, which also brings me to you to that. Can you share more about your university, that 4 cities, that the course that you have did? the master's course that you and Arshia has done together, traveling to 4 cities.
Right. I think, Arshia, do you want to speak about this?
Yeah, please, two of you can speak.
Yeah, why not? I think you just gave a nice brief summary of what it was, and as you said, it's probably an experience that you can only get once in a lifetime. It's I mean, every experience you can only get it once in a lifetime, anyways. But but this one in particular was a precious one. As Anne had said, we were 31 people from so many different backgrounds, nationalities, and life histories. And then we came together to do this master's for 2 years. We started off in Brussels, and we had two universities that we were affiliated with in Brussels. The courses and the focus of the program in Brussels was mostly on, critical social sciences, and let's say economic geographies and a little bit of urban sociology and geography. So that was our main academic focus. And of course, in every city, we also connected a lot with the city on different levels. We had to, of course, take care of our lives in that city. So we had to find ourselves a home. We had to build ourselves a routine and all of that. But then again, academically, we also engaged a lot with the city that we were in. So in Brussels, we were divided in smaller groups, and each of these groups were working on one neighborhood of Brussels, and we were doing extensive ethnographic field work there. And that's definitely something that is always dear to me. And then again, in Vienna, which was our next city, we were affiliated with one university, University of Vienna, and our courses there were more planning oriented. And then we were focusing a lot on Eastern Europe and urban development in Eastern Europe. So we had so many excursions and field trips to different cities around, especially in the post-socialist context of Eastern Europe. And then again, the third city was Copenhagen, where we were at the University of Copenhagen. And here the focus was more cultural. So we were at the cultural studies department, and we were engaging with the more humanistic side of urban studies. And our fourth city was Madrid, where we were at two different universities, and there the focus was, let's say, more on governance and sustainability and urban politics. So, so I think through these 4 semesters, you can get like a well-rounded perspective on different ways of looking at the city and also at space at large. And then parallel to that, you of course have your own life experience, which is sweetly intense in those 2 years. So.
I agree, yes.
So thank you, Arshia and Anhad, for explaining that briefly to us. Ankita has a question asked by Laksh on the Facebook feed.
Yeah. Ankita, if you can switch on your camera and your,
Yeah. So the question is asking is, I would like Arshia to explain the feeling of being in a foreign land where the language isn't yours, you look different, and so on. I'd love to hear how does one's presence impact the urban scape, or for that matter, any scape. Does it have any impact at all? And how the experience of fitting in is?
Yes. Well, that's a very good question, a very important one, and I think there is certainly no one simple answer to that. Um, it definitely does impact the the context around you and also your own perception and understanding of everything. Um, there is no denying that in any context, let alone the context where you are foreign to a place, um, you face all sorts of challenges. Um, and yes, of course, language is a big barrier. Um, and also an interesting thing though, because you you also understand how much of a city, let's say, for example, you tend to read on a daily basis. I mean, you go out and you see signs that you have not seen before. And not all of those signs are even written in that foreign language, but they are just like in certain ways of graphical communications that you're not used to them. It just might be a certain kind of graphical sign that you don't understand. So every time you put yourself in a new context, and I would say you are thrown into a context to take a bit of a Heideggerian thrownness into it as well. You're just thrown into a life situation, and then you have to adapt to that. And that's a kind of very interesting tactical ability that you also um, tend to cultivate then in yourself to be able to adapt to various situations. Sometimes some of them might be quite hostile, other times they might be very welcoming and nice. So it's all of that. And then again, it has the flip side of this is also the way you experience things within yourself. And I think again to take a little bit of a philosophical turn on that, it's um, you know, the Merleau-Ponty, the French phenomenologist, he says something interesting, and that is that memories and perception are not merely distorted projections of the outer world in us, but they are our original experience and way of connecting and relating to the outer world. And then we can see that there is this sort of inherent way of seeing that is embedded in objects and our way of experiencing and engaging with them. And then again, that can be just extended to all sorts of situations. So that's just something to keep in mind, that our memories and our way of perception is not only just some sort of distorted reality that, okay, this is how I perceive this thing, but maybe the reality is something totally different. But it's to understand that that reality is in a way also relevant to our own perception and subjectivity. So definitely it's very important that the subject who is experiencing a city, a situation, um, in what sort of experience you get.
Thank you, Arshia. I'll invite Madhur and Ankita to conclude this session.
Yeah, hi. We are very thankful uh, for this presentation to Arshia and Anand to introduce four cities group in urban studies. Definitely, we would be interested to have more insights about the group, about more presentations for the students of architecture to think about. And I would like to thank Ankita for representing the student body. I would like to thank Lakshya for giving to he's on Facebook, currently putting all the insights and he's highlighting them. Our conversations are being highlighted on Facebook. And I would like to thank Deepak for all his scribbles and his notes, which will be one of the insights for future for our recording with the voice as well as graphics. And I would definitely be thankful to Shailesh, the person behind connecting all the dots and creating a forum. This is the first presentation which we had this afternoon, and it was great. Great, Shailesh. Thank you so much for connecting all the people together. Definitely, we will be looking forward to have something more from you.
Thank you, Madhur sir. Thank you, Madhur sir, for doing this. Being an academician yourself and being having so much experience in your field, and still, giving this space for a moderator and coming out and discussing the critical things. I mean, it's really. We all are thankful for all the moderators for bringing their questions and for triggering these ideas into our minds. Thank you, Arshia. Thank you, Anhad. Thank you, Madhur. Thank you, Ankita, and thank you, Deepak, again. I hope we'll keep meeting for these sessions with different perspectives to bring to student of architecture, so that we get more exposure in India related to architecture, and also related to different things that we yet have to know. Before we end, I will like Anhad to introduce about Ajivika and what his organization has been working with construction workers and migrant laborers. And with that, we'll take an end. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Shailesh, for that last addition to this session. I work as a consultant, a communications and advocacy consultant with Ajivika Bureau, which some of you might have heard of in the news lately. We are a non-profit. We work with labor and migration and in different capacities, and across Rajasthan, Maharashtra, and Gujarat. As you would have seen already, that in the aftermath of the COVID-19 lockdown, the population that is arguably the worst affected as a result of everything shut is the migrant workers across cities. With everything shut, they have had no incomes, they have had no access to food. Many of them have been evicted from their living spaces because they have not been able to pay rent. A lot of them have actually, in the last couple of weeks, walked back home. Those who have not been able to walk back home are stranded on interstate borders, have been subject to police harassment. So there's no, I mean, I can go on and on, but the point is that this is a population that's really been severely affected. In response, we have had a multi-pronged strategy to respond to the needs of this population. In our areas of operation, we've been running services in provision of food and essentials. We have also been providing healthcare, primary healthcare. We've also tried to, in different capacities, provide financial assistance so that their livelihoods can be renewed, or at least to the extent that they have the purchasing power to buy ration. We also have a labor line, a helpline promoted by the government of the state of Rajasthan. It's actually run by the government and it's outsourced to us. We have been receiving distress calls in the thousands on a daily basis. Finally, we have been involved in producing as much information on this subject as possible through articles, blogs, and our social media handles. At present, we have a number of awareness videos, a nationwide fundraiser. We would be very grateful if all of those viewing this can support us in whichever way you see fit. Shailesh and many of the participants on this platform have also, in their own capacity, been volunteering with us, helping us through illustrations and through support on our media channels. For more information, you can check out Ajivika Bureau on Facebook, on Twitter, and on YouTube. Yeah, thank you. If you have any other questions, you can get in touch with either us on our website or on any of the social media handles that I just talked about.
Thank you. Before we go, I'd like to thank all the audience who has joined us today. And I hope as an architect, we'll be the critical thinker for the world and we'll take it somewhere that is more humanitarian and that has more love in it. Thank you.
Bye-bye.